What's that quote again? Comparison is the thief of joy. Comparisonitis is the deatheater dementor of the digital landscape. Comparisonitis, which is to me the plague, the disease, the contagion of comparison, widespread and debilitating, the ultimate suffocation to your creativity. When we use scrolling to conveniently compare ourselves to everyone else, it is the most violent drive-by shooting in the foot of its kind. You're just trying to walk your merry way down the block, and then your alter asshole ego comes out of nowhere, cock blocking you and shooting you in the foot. It's not only self-sabotage, it's self-betrayal, it's self-harm, and there's no part of toxic compulsive comparisonitis on social media that will do you any good. Blaming the people you compare yourselves to because shame on them for showcasing this or being too perfect or being too superficial or blah 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 is a projection of the work you need to do on your insides. How they feel about themselves should have nothing to do with how you feel about yourselves. Here's the caveat. Humans are actually born programmed to compare themselves to others. How we develop our sense of self, our identity, is in our relationships with others, which extends to in our reflections of ourselves. And in that reflection piece is an inevitable comparison. But there's two kinds of comparing that someone can do. One is positive, one is negative. One leads to growth, one leads to compulsion and spiraling. If we're all born to compare, destined to compare, what goes so horribly wrong? So I'd like to draw your attention to upward social comparison and downward social comparison. When you're comparing yourself to somebody that you perceive as superior to you or better than you, it can be just as dysfunctional as when you compare yourself to someone you perceive to be lower than you or inferior to you, which is downward social comparison. However, the same can be said about either of those comparisons working in your favor, either of them being positive comparisons. So we might look up to somebody and be really motivated and inspired, and it calls us to be more of ourselves, to step up, rise to the occasion, literally meet them where they're at. And then we might compare ourselves to somebody below us, and it'd be a really positive experience because it gives us the perspective we need to value ourselves or make a change or avoid making mistakes. So if upward social comparison and downward social comparison are not bad in their nature, they're just things we do in our journey of reflecting on ourselves in the reflections of others, being molded by those interactions, being motivated as we mull over what we see, looking upwards or downwards. What are we missing? What goes wrong? And this little insidious nugget is really worth remembering because it will come up over and over and over again as you mitigate some of the gnarly social media shadow work you're going to come up against. It's in the individual's unique ability and responsibility, by the way, to self-mediate their self-esteem as they make those comparisons. Let's say that again because it is worth emphasizing. If we're all born to compare, if we're all shaped by comparison, what leads us astray down this volatile, really disheartening path of compulsive comparisonitis? No external force, no external factor, no person outside of you is responsible for your compulsion. The compulsion to compare arises out of your inability to self-mediate your own self-esteem as you compare. I remember this absolutely rocking my freaking world when I first started to contemplate some of the not pretty, not sexy feelings that I would feel using social media. What specifically I was doing behind closed doors, and when I mean closed doors, I mean behind these closed eyes, really looking in the dark, ugly corners of my inner thoughts. And it's one of those ball-busting, excruciatingly simple truths, which is once you realize you're the problem, you also realize that you are the solution. Truly, some of my most mind-bending, amazing, catalyzing epiphanies have come from the realization I'm the issue. When I'm the issue, I'm not waiting for anybody else to make it better. I'm not waiting for some miracle to fall out of the sky. I'm not waiting for permission or an apology or forgiveness or anything else. I just have to do the opposite of what I did when I created the problem, and boom, there you have it, the solution. The dark night of the soul for me was that I was not jealous of others. I was afraid of myself. Longing for what others had kept me from taking action to create what it is I wanted to have. When you take a freaking hot second to look at the real reasons you do things, you'll notice that there's a superficial reason and then there's the real reason. Going for the superficial is like finding a scab on your skin right before it heals and scratching it off just to piss off your skin, and then letting a new scab grow back so you can pick at that scab and keep that cycle going. Getting to the real issue is, why do I somehow manage to find my way to that scab right as it is about to heal, to scrape it off and watch it fall to the ground? Why do I keep creating this problem? Why do I don't close loops? Why do I always have to get in the way of my own healing? Comparisonitis is like picking a scab on a wound that is just trying to heal, but instead you keep choosing to pick the scab to keep the problem alive. Sometimes comparison is a great idea. Let's talk about when we actually need comparison to make us better, to hold us more accountable, such as a competition-based setting or a community-based setting where teamwork is required. Too often I see the actual requirement of comparing ourselves against others to do better diminished, because you hear, don't compare yourself to others, don't give yourself that pressure, you are enough, which on paper is fine and dandy. In real time, not so much. In a competition-based setting where you have an actual team who needs you to fulfill your role, to step into what you have been enrolled or engaged to do, to make sure we're always on our A game, but also to make sure we can be our best and play the best game with our team members who are being simultaneously inspired to play their best game by witnessing us play our best game. In a competitive landscape where failure to be self-aware brings everybody down. On the other hand, in a community setting like social media, where the tech and the engineering is designed to reward relationship, and you, the business owner, brand, content creator, social media pro, that you can somehow bypass your way to the top, win the game without playing the game, ask for engagement without giving the engagement, commanding participation from others without actually gifting that participation. It goes without saying that as a creator who's trying to do this professionally, I mean, look at Mr. Beast, he's the perfect example of this. You should always be trying to set that bar higher than the last guy. How do you be more creative, more innovative, more inventive? How can you get sharper with the tech? How do you position yourself in a more favorable, dramatic, charismatic way by referring to all the things you're gathering in the act of comparing yourself to other creators? Industry best practice, what's working, what's not, the nature of trends. The consumer, though, has convinced themselves that they don't need to worry about best practice, that they don't need to worry about showing up with their best foot forward, that they don't need to worry about being responsible for the energy they bring to the space, for how they scroll or what they say. Weaseling closer to a more pro-social, positive social media environment is comparing ourselves to the people, comparing ourselves to other consumers of social media who are not acting hostile, volatile, jealous, judgmental, who are being productive, purposeful, people-driven, positive with the ways they show up online, who are generous with their presence and the ways that they pay attention. Let those people inspire you to use social media in a different way. It is okay. And in fact, I encourage to ask more of yourself. If you can close your eyes right now and honestly tell yourself that the person in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that version of you is exactly like who it is that is here today, you're lying to yourself. There's bound to be change. And in that change, there are two things available, a downgrade or an upgrade. You get to choose the upgrade if you're willing to compare positively. You'll default to the downgrade if you sink back into comparing yourself negatively. Remember, this all lies in the power of your ability to self-mediate your self-esteem as you go about placing yourself in the world and figuring out where you fit through the reflections of the exchanges you have with others. Whether that person knows, whether that person on the other end is even aware they're having the exchange with you at all. Happy comparing. Might this catalyze your next big upgrade?